Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Line Movement pre-kickoff show. We're doing a special Saturday edition, move back the Thursday show because of this three-game slate. I am joined, as always, with my buddies, Joe Holka, Matt LaMarca. Are you guys feeling a little more bright-eyed and bushy-tailed than I am this morning?
Pete, we've been on this call for, 10 or 15 minutes, and you've just been kind of like, yeah, guys, let's do the show. And then literally lights on, camera, action, and you're ready to go, man. That was an impressive, little conversion you did there. I like it.
That's what pros do, right, LaMarca? We just flip the switch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a switch. My switch is perma off, but it is impressive. You're like, we were talking this morning. I'm like, yeah, I've been up grinding since 7 a.m. I wrote a bunch of articles. You're like, yeah, I was grinding too. I had to be up drinking till 3 a.m. on stream. And I was like, man, one day I want to be you when I grow up.
I don't want to be me in the morning right now. But Joe, I'm actually curious. Can you do some of your poll magic and ask the chat if they're playing the 3-game slates or the 6-game slates? I'm kind of curious what everyone's mainly playing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we need to run a poll. I did one earlier today on my stream, and it was pretty drastically in favor of either the Saturday only or the Sunday only. No one's playing the 6-game slate. The contests are just completely terrible on DraftKings, so it's hard to blame them. It's kind of a bummer. That would have been a slate that would have been really fun to talk about. I think there would have been a lot more probably in-depth game theory involved for a 6-gamer. But yeah, I think everyone's just playing the big prize pool, so hard to blame them.
So I think what we're going to do for today is we are going to first talk about the Saturday games here. LaMarca is going to get us up to speed on the betting angles. We'll touch on the DFS stuff. Then we'll grab any inactive news at around 11:30 for this Colts Buffalo game. And then we'll wrap up with kind of a betting preview for tomorrow's games as well and some DFS thoughts. So that's what we're going to do here. So why don't we dive in, Matt? I'm gonna tail you on some of these, so I need you giving out winners. I haven't made any, spread bets, so I need you in peak form. What are the Sharps doing with this Colts Bills game? Because a trope all year has been the Sharps love the Colts, but everyone loves the Bills too.
Yeah, this game, the betting activity definitely is favoring Buffalo at the moment. They have 61% of the spread bets, but 80% of the spread dollars. But if you look at the numbers across the industry, it is kind of interesting. Like what I would consider the square books out there have this line at 7 or 7.5, meaning they're taking a ton of Buffalo action. But some of the sharper books have this line at like 6.5. So I do think that 7 is sort of like the magic number in this game. Once we get to 7, the sharps are probably on the side of the Colts, but anything less than that, it looks like they like the Bills. The biggest sharp lean in this game has been on the under. It's dropped from 52.5 at opening to just 51. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the week, me, Joe Holka, and Dieter on our Tuesday stream. But the under in outdoor playoff games has historically been very profitable, 81, 60, and 4 against the spread since 2004. So that's good for a return on investment of over 11%, cover rate right around 57.5%. So the under appears to be the play here. And 5 of these 6 games this week are going to be outdoors. So that trend's going to apply to a lot of these contests.
Joe, I was doing a ton of those underdog playoff drafts. I'm hammering the Bills, going overweight on them. Later in the week, I was starting to get a little spooked. I was starting to hedge a little bit. I'm reading Brandon Thorne's column over there. The Colts have both an offensive line and defensive line mismatch in his rankings. Where are you at here? Are you interested in some contrarian Colts plays?
Man, my heart is, I mean, not to the extent of Leone, but my heart wants to just be all in on Stephon Diggs and the Bills here. Just they're a fun team to watch. You see them dancing around in playoffs, all that stuff. Philip Rivers on the other side. It's an easy narrative just to be on the Buffalo side, but then you look a little bit deeper, and there are some spots where Indy could make this a game for sure. So I'm with you on that. I guess one of the other things that was making me a little bit nervous is that as you start building lineups on DraftKings, like you can do whatever you want. The pricing is not tight whatsoever. So like that's part of the reason that Stephon Diggs is going to be so owned as well. Like Stephon Diggs and like some of the contests we're playing, Pete, could reach like 75, 80% ownership on a 3-game slate. Like that stuff's going to happen. But I don't know. Like there's past a failure here. I still think that on the betting side, like I still think that Buffalo is the side that I'd want to be on if that's the square side. So be it. In DFS, I think you kind of said it. You need to be on one side of this. You either need to be extremely overweight on Diggs and on Josh Allen, or you need to just hope that this game fails and Indy ends up making a little bit more of a gross game outdoors. So I think I'm probably leaning towards the overweight side, but like you, Pete, I'm getting more nervous as the morning goes on that just that ownership and this game that everyone wants to be on, the public wants to be on, might not be the best way. Like that, this is what's scaring me the most about the slate, no doubt.
The one injury situation we have to monitor here is Cole Beasley. Earlier in the week, they were saying he was week to week. Late in the week, they were saying he was going to gut it out. Gene Bramall over at Football Guys thought that the video on the injury suggested something that was higher grade and more serious. Even if he goes, I'm inclined to think he's not going to be heavily utilized or that effective. They have so much depth in their pass catching core, and they have other good slot options. We saw Isaiah McKenzie and Dawson Knox step in there and fill in great. So, LaMarca, do you have a read on how kind of the Cole Beasley situation could shift kind of the values across the pass catchers?
Yeah, I mean, Gabriel Davis becomes like the contrarian type stacking partner with Allen. I do think that that's the big question you have to ask yourself, right? Like, what are we doing with Josh Allen? What are we doing with Stephon Diggs? Because they probably will be the 2 highest owned players on the slate. Like you said, it's just too easy to build a lineup. Like, you know, you look at a guy like John Walford, right? 4,900. There's no reason to ever consider playing him because you just don't need the savings. So it's really hard to find an alternative to Josh Allen on this slate. So the question becomes, how do we stack him up somewhat contrarily? And I think that I'm hoping Beasley is in the lineup because that gives us some additional options in that department.
Yeah, and I actually think, I mean, and it's not even just Diggs and Allen who are going to catch a ton of ownership. John Brown is going to be incredibly popular at 4,700, specifically if Cole Beasley is out as
Right.
well. I'm with you. I hope Cole Beasley goes so it gives us some more options. I mean, if Cole Beasley doesn't go, I still think Isaiah McKenzie will probably be under owned because people will feel more comfortable with Brown and Gabriel Davis there. Are you on that one, Joe?
Yeah, that's one that I'm still trying to figure out because there's the aspect of what you just said. Like if Cole Beasley played, people are going to play him, but also like McKenzie's coming off this massive game where he was like kind of overlooked by a lot of people. So I think there might be some people that might go the other way and kind of just be, oh, Beasley's banged up. Maybe Isaiah McKenzie is this like sneaky play. So I could see both sides of it. This game is just going to draw so much ownership from the Bills side of things that I wanted to try and figure out unique ways to grab like kind of some lower owned flyers in this game. Do you have any guys that stand out to you, Pete? Like maybe it's one of those guys on the other side of the ball. Maybe it's Pascal. Maybe it's someone like Pittman, and we can get a little bit of leverage on the field if that's where the touchdowns go on the Indy side.
I do think that's the way to play this. Like, if you do want to play Bills, it's going to be super hard to get unique with Bills just based on their ownership. So I think it's going overweight on this game, playing for just a massive shootout and bringing it back with two Colts. And I think there's lots of good options. Like you said, you can play it where the Colts play from a lead with Jonathan Taylor. You could even potentially play just pass catchers coming back. You could play it like Nyheim Hines and Michael Pittman. I mean, I assume those two would be a pretty unique combo. You mentioned Pascal. I think that is the way to do it. And that's kind of how I think you want to play that game. It has the highest total on this slate. I mean, the only game that could maybe match it, I think, is going to be that Bucks game. But even then, it's hard to imagine that game having this ceiling. LaMarca, we haven't talked a ton about the Colts side. I think, on the shows that I've been doing this week, the big riddle has been, is Jonathan Taylor going to be a full 3-down workhorse? Or if they get behind, are we going to see a ton of Nyheim Hines? Do you have a read on that?
I do think Hines will still be a factor in the passing game. Certainly, Taylor sets up as an excellent play if the Colts can keep this game competitive. The Bills definitely have a vulnerability against the running games. So I think Taylor and Hines both have some appeal. My bigger question is, how do we see the ownership shaking out between Pittman versus Pascal? Because Pittman is technically the guy who plays more snaps, but Pascal has been the more productive player recently. So I want one of those two guys in my lineup. I mean, they're both excellent values, I think, given the the projected game script here. The question is just which one is going to be lower owned, because that's the guy that I think I want to plant my flag on.
Yeah, and I think both are going to be pretty low owned. So I think you can kind of pick your preferred there. It looks like Pittman will be slightly higher, maybe 10%, and Pascal will be down there in the 5% range. So I think you can get unique with any of those depending on the field size you're playing. Just circling back to a question that Conman had in the chat, he said, did Isaiah McKenzie just get a lot of run in week 17 because of the blowout and being second string quarterback in? Is he ahead of Gabriel Davis depth chart wise? The reason I don't know if it's applicable is because I think they play two different positions basically for them, where Gabriel Davis is kind of playing that stretch X role along with John Brown. I would say those two have more of the duplicated skill set. And then Isaiah McKenzie, they were using out of the slot, obviously giving him those gadget touches with the end arounds. So do you guys agree with that? Where I see McKenzie more as a Beasley fill-in and Gabriel Davis and John Brown as the similar plays?
Yeah, I think Gabriel Davis is the one that I'm the most worried about because I think that's the clear, like, if John Brown is back, Gabriel Davis is the one that's going to lose those snaps. So I think McKenzie, you can kind of, I mean, what was working last week in the slot, you can still manufacture those touches for two different guys pretty easily in different sets. But I think the Gabriel Davis, like John Brown thing is more of a 1v1 versus like on the field. Do I have that right, you think, LaMarca, or what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that, yeah, like, I mean, you guys have hit on it. McKenzie's the slot guy. Davis is the outside player. So I think that, yeah, that makes total sense to me.
Pete, on this game, though, we haven't talked about T.Y. Hilton. So I'm curious, like, since he's not playing Houston, are we allowed to play T.Y. Hilton? I never know what to do if he's not playing Houston. Like, I just feel like he's off my board, right?
Yeah, so I mean, it does seem like Taylor and Hilton are going to be the preferred bringbacks for people, trying to stack up this game. So I'm less interested in Hilton there. I'm kind of on the line with LaMarca. I want to go with maybe Hines, Pittman, Pascal, and try to get unique there. if we're playing Dig stacks or Allen stacks, and then we're bringing it back with Taylor and Hilton, it's just like now we're playing 5v5, 6v6s, and Ryan Hodge is playing cash games against my GPP team. So, that's not something I'm necessarily looking to do, but I do think he's a good play. I mean, all of these guys on this slate, like you mentioned earlier, are all underpriced relative. It's pretty soft. You can get these guys in. So I do think you need to be pretty mindful of how you're attacking it. Another situation in this game that we didn't talk about are the Bills running backs. And I actually think that might be another way to get unique in your Allen stacks. And normally, Eric Beimfor, I talked about this with him on my stream yesterday. Normally, tossing the tight end to your stacks is a good way to get unique. But because Knox's ownership is similar to Logan Thomas and Gronk, I don't actually feel like you're getting much kind of unique leverage there. And I think Logan Thomas and Gronk can separate from Knox. So I almost think tossing in Singletary or Moss to your Josh Allen stacks might be the way to go. If you do Allen, Bills running back, and then two of the pass catchers. So do you guys have a preference on Singletary and Zach Moss? Because they've been kind of in a 50-50 split most of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I go ahead, LaMarca. I've been playing these guys on Showdown only, just because you can't really project them for over 15 touches ever. But what are your thoughts on it, LaMarca?
Yeah, I think if you're doing it as part of a larger Bills stack, Singletary is the clear preferred choice, just because he is the guy that has some pass catching upside. If you look at the correlations, Singletary is at roughly 36% positive correlation with Allen, while Moss is negatively correlated with Allen. So I much prefer the Singletary route. And I do agree that that's actually a pretty interesting way to stack this game up, because normally you would think, Allen and his running backs have a pretty negative correlation because he's going to score all the rushing touchdowns. But, it does seem like Singletary at least has some path to relevance with Allen also having a good game.
Yeah, and I do agree with you, because that's normally the trippy thing of like, well, if Zach Moss is getting goal line touchdowns, then Josh Allen isn't getting those, or they're not passing. But on these shorter slates, we're trying to identify the bigger correlation, which is what team is going off and how can we get as many of these points as possible. The perfect example being a few weeks ago when the Bucs just destroyed the Lions, and basically every one of their skill position players was in the optimal lineup there. So those are the situations we are trying to attack here. Let's move on to Seattle and the Rams. We'll circle back with inactives here in about 15-20 minutes. Maybe we'll get some more news on Cole Beasley. The chat having a spirited debate about Cole Beasley right now, so we'll touch back on that. LaMarca, what are we looking at here with the betting markets on this interesting Seattle game? Have they priced it in for Goff or Wolford yet? Because that seems legitimately up in the air a bit.
Yeah, I do think that the line right now is priced like Goff is going to play. That's my, amateur opinion here. We still have very little clarity. The last thing I saw was Rappaport put out a tweet last night that Walford is preparing to play, but that Goff has looked good in practice and Sean McVay hasn't made a final decision yet. So I have no idea what the point of that report was. It was basically a non-report, but that's where we're at. We're going to just have to play the waiting game here. As far as the betting numbers go, Seattle is a slight public target, 58%, but the Rams have the dollar edge. I mean, they're at 47%, but they're right around, like a plus 5% dollars versus tickets. So this is an interesting game. Another game that I think the under might be the best bet on the board, even with such a low total. But it's going to be interesting, right? Like both of these teams have played very good defense recently. Seattle, 16 points per game over their last 8 games. We know the Rams are solid on that side of the ball. So the real question is just, are there going to be any points in this contest? Like, I don't see a ton of interesting players in this game. I mean, I think Cam Akers is going to be popular, but other than that, like, I don't know where you really look at.
Yeah, and just to circle back on the the Jared Goff thing, I was reading Gene Bramall's kind of injury report. What he had said was he's been throwing in practice with minimal support on the thumb joint, but it's unclear what kind of velocity and accuracy he'll have today during the game. Seemed like they were even leaving the door open where, he might start, see how he's doing. If it's not feeling good, then pull him out. So I think there is lots of risk to this situation. Joe, like LaMarca said, Akers is going to be the most popular guy from this game. Yeah, it's really, really tough. I mean, do you have any love for the pass catchers here? I mean, we have the big four, these guys that have been studs throughout the year. Do you like any of their spots?
Yeah, so we talked about this earlier in the week, and now that I'm building lineups, Pete, like I think that the way to get unique on this slate is to leave a good chunk of salary on the table. And we talked about that like at times, but if you open up your salary and run some optimals, you'll get a lot more of this Bills and Colts game just in general. So I think that pricing is kind of irrelevant at this point. So like it's going to lead people to DK Metcalf. It's going to lead people to Tyler Lockett. And the beginning of the week, I was like, okay, if no one's going to play Metcalf versus Ramsey, then he makes a lot of sense. But now we have all the salary in the world. So getting guys in like Metcalf in your lineup, even as one-offs, or even getting Lockett in as a pivot off of Metcalf, he's like basically the same price. So you're not getting any ownership discount for either of these guys. So I think the real leverage is just being underweight on some of these situations. If you're just filling out your roster and your salary just because you have the salary to do it, I don't know. I still feel like I'd rather just like skew towards the best game environment. It's 3 games. Pick the game you think is going to be the highest scoring and overstack it. That's kind of where I'm at. So yeah, there's some pieces of this game. If you want to play like the grosser side of it, maybe it's because Cam Akers is extremely underpriced at 5,100. So he came back from that ankle injury last week. Like he racked up 21 carries in that game. So like I think his ankle is fine. Like basically was not on the final injury report. So we don't have to worry about that. So I think like the more I look at this, Pete, I'm just going to make some unique bill stacks, I think, and then try and just grab one-offs as we go and just hope that the rest of these games suck. 'Cause I think there's a chance still, like as we haven't gotten to the Tom Brady side of things, but I think that game number 2, game number 3 might be significantly lower scoring than game number 1. You guys agree with that?
Yeah, no, I do. The narrative I've been trying to talk myself into is like, all right, maybe the wheels are off here and Russ will, or, finally be able to cook. Maybe Pete Carroll will be like, it's playoff time. I don't need to establish it. But then again, on the other side, Matt, now they're in a really tough matchup against the Rams, who have muddied up all of their games. Even me, a noted wide receiver, cornerback, fader, has to be a little worried about what Jalen Ramsey can do to DK Metcalf and just slowing this offense down. Do you have any love for the Seattle passing game here?
I can't do it. I want to do it. Like the contrarian in me wants to say Russell Wilson at, less than 15% ownership on a 3-game slate is a good play. But I almost called them the Ravens. The Seahawks, like their defense was so bad early in the year. I really think that Pete Carroll has just come around to the notion that the only way they're going to win football games is by playing slow, not letting Russ do Russ things. If you look at his game log, the only time he has exceeded salary-based expectations in his last 10 contests was against the Jets.
Yeah.
That's the only time. The other 7 games out of his last 8, he has disappointed from a fantasy perspective. So I get wanting to play Metcalf or Lockett as a one-off. I prefer Lockett because unlike you guys, I do have some fear of cornerbacks. I think Jalen Ramsey has done a pretty darn good job against Metcalf this season. But other than that, I can't do it. Like Carson probably is my favorite Seattle option. It's just 5,900. I think he would be the way that I would go.
Yeah, I think, the other thing that's tough about it, even with using some of those guys as one-offs, like if I'm using Lockett or Metcalf as a one-off and I'm getting a ceiling game from them, Russell Wilson is probably pulling past Josh Allen at that point, just when you factor in price. And, if we get a 3-touchdown Lockett or Metcalf game, like this game is probably blowing up and is the game you want. So I just feel like it's tricky to thread the needle of like the one-off guy in a gross game. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, no, it does for sure. But like at that point, if you are wrong on the beginning and your lineup is basically dead anyway, you just pivot to the lowest owned play in that game that makes some sort of sense. So I don't know. It just seems like we're we're trying to figure out a narrative to where this game looks appealing, and it seems like we're forcing it. That's my point.
And I do think that's a good point that Joe just made. We've talked about this a lot throughout the season on the tilt space with when you have the chalk late, you can make those decisions later. So if you want to jam your Josh Allen stacks and then you're playing, I don't know, Chris Carson, Rojo, Cam Akers, whoever some of those popular guys are, you can let that ride if you're slamming. But if Josh Allen, only puts up 20 points in this spot and they don't get there, then you need to be getting on some DK Metcalf, getting on some Cooper Kupp stuff and taking shots to try to make up some points on the rest of the chalk. So I think that's a good note too, of you can kind of make those decisions later. And because the pricing is so soft and because all of these guys are clumped up together, you can really pivot those 2v2s any direction you want. So make sure that you're reviewing your lineups after this first game and making the necessary adjustments, because that is still one of the bigger edges you guys will have on this slate. Let's move on to this last game here. We have the Bucs and the Washington football team. The quick injury news and notes here. It sounds like Antonio Gibson and McLaurin, who were a little banged up throughout the week and questionable, are good to go. On the flip side, Alex Smith, it sounds like the calf is a legitimate issue. It's been limiting his mobility in practice. It sounds like Taylor Heineke might go. LaMarca, has the betting line reflected this?
Yeah, it's on the move. It's up now to 9 or even 9.5 at some places. The Bucs have gotten some steam moves here recently. This line has been interesting all week, right? It's been kind of like a roller coaster. It was 8.5, then it got down to 7.5 at certain points, and now it appears that we're on the upswing again. As far as tickets versus dollars, the Bucs are at 59% on the tickets, 62% on the dollars. It wouldn't shock me if that number increased as we got closer to kickoff and more casual money started coming in. But we've got to talk about my favorite narrative of the week here, guys.
Do it.
The Tom Brady bedtime narrative.
I was listening to Silva talk about this the other day. This is absurd. I'll let you go.
Tom Brady apparently goes to bed at 8:30, like a child. And if you look, his last 7 games, including the Titans in the playoffs last year, 0-7 against the spread in his last 7 night games. Small sample size, 7 games, but he's 0-4 this year. He lost his last 2 regular season primetime games last year, and he lost in the playoffs against the Titans. So Brady bedtime narrative. It's
internal
lit.
clock.
Yeah, so I do think this game is interesting for a couple of reasons. I mean, the Bucs have, the second highest implied team total if you are looking to get off of the Josh Allen chalk. The other interesting thing here is the Mike Evans situation. He hyperextended his knee, but everything since then has been relatively positive considering how bad it looked. He had the MRI, didn't reveal much. Gene Bramwell said there's been minimal swelling. He's been getting movement, light work throughout the week. I don't think this feels like a Keenan Allen situation if he goes and is just going to play 5 snaps. But I also don't think he's going to, be playing every snap, racking up a 10-plus target game. Joe, do you have a lean on how you're handling Evans? Is he an interesting contrarian play, or are you looking to kind of capitalize on how the other pass catchers might benefit?
I think I'm on the other side of I think I'd want to be playing the narrative that he's going to be more of a decoy. I think that there's enough people out there that are just going to play him anyways and just try and capture that upside at lower ownership when it's harder to find on a 3-game slate. I think that it's more likely that he's still just not right at this point. So, and another part of this is if we're going to try and focus on if Tom Brady is going to have a poor game, you would think that there's just not going to be time for these guys to get down the field. I guess the inverse of that is that this Washington team, you don't want to try and attack in the interior. You want to attack them on the outside. So I think Antonio Brown is the guy that I'm going to end up being overweight on this game. Another team that's really good at defending the tight ends, and Gronk is going to be really popular. So I kind of somewhat disagree with you on the Gronk separation versus Dawson Knox peak, because I think that if we're focusing on trying to get different in the first game, Dawson Knox might be a better bet just because it is a really tough spot for Gronk. But I don't know, man. This is a tough situation with Evans. I think it definitely affects Tom Brady's projection. So I guess if you think that you're going to get at least at 85% Mike Evans, you're probably a little bit more bullish on Brady. If you think that Evans is going to be out there and just not be right, I think you probably are a little bit more bearish on Brady overall.
And it does, based on ownership projections, seem like the way people primarily want to play this game is through Rojo. They're looking at the spread. They're saying the Bucks roll. Brady doesn't need to throw a ton. Rojo gets 20 plus carries. That definitely pushes me toward wanting to play the pass game a little more, just because we've seen it all year where these pass catchers go under owned relative to their upside because people don't want to risk taking the guy who gets 5 points versus the guy who's going to get 25. LaMarca, do you have a favorite pass catcher here? And are you inclined to play the pass catching side versus Rojo?
I mean, I do think Rojo's underpriced. It always comes down to, like the guys who are going to command the most ownership are probably the best plays. So I do think Ronald Jones at 5,500 is like a good play today. But yeah, if you're looking to get more contrarian, I totally get the idea of pivoting over to the passing game. I like Mike Evans. He has a history of playing well when injured. He's not like a Julio who's out there, primarily just to be a decoy. He can actually produce when he's banged up. But also, Chris Godwin has the arguably the best matchup of the slate from at the wide receiver position. According to Pro Football Focus, he's got a 53% edge over the Washington slot corner. So this is an interesting, just game in general. Like if you are like me and think that maybe Washington can cover, then how much exposure to a somewhat chalky Tampa Bay side do you want? We've also seen in the past, like the formula for beating Tom Brady is being able to get pressure with just your front four. And Washington is the type of team that can do that. So I don't love this matchup in general for the Bucks. I think I will personally be underweight. But again, this gets back to that same problem with the Bills. Like if we are going to be underweight on Tampa, then what the heck are we going to do? Like you have to play Buffalo at that point.
Yeah. Joe, we have the kind of three concentrated skill position players here on Washington. I mean, almost everything's going to go through Gibson, Logan Thomas, and Terry McLaurin. Heineken did have an eye for Logan Thomas when Heineke last played. I think Logan Thomas is a great play, kind of regardless of who's at quarterback. But do you have any feelings on Gibson or McLaurin? Because I feel like they could end up being some of the plays that get squeezed, even relative to their ownership projection, and come in fairly low.
Yeah, it's possible. I think that the separation at tight end is Logan Thomas and then those other guys, just to kind of clarify that. So I'm with you. I think that he's the guy if I wanted to try and grab a piece of this passing game. McLaurin at his price, like I still prefer trying to get into that game number one with John Brown or T.Y. Hilton in that range, even like Robert Woods in game number two over McLaurin. So I agree with you that I think that he might end up getting squeezed, especially if people want to talk themselves into a Seahawks wide receiver. It's just one of those guys that if you're waiting around for it, Terry McLaurin might be like that hammer in this game. So I don't know. It's definitely the optimal side of me. Kind of just wants to have Logan Thomas teams, but I could see myself moving to some Terry McLaurin and late swap for sure.
All right, guys. I'm not going to go to space today for inactive corner. I've just been exhausted. I don't have my astronaut ice cream and all that jazz. So I am from Earth going to let you guys know Cole Beasley is going to play. Kim Jones, reporter, said that he'll be active, going to try to give it a go with the knee, which doesn't inspire a ton of I don't know, positive thoughts for me as far as how effective he'll be, but I do like it as far as how it helps the slate, how it helps us to maybe get some other guys lower owned. Do you guys have any takes on this Cole Beasley situation now that it's solidified?
Go ahead, LaMarca.
Yeah, I mean, if he's gonna be a popular play, and I do think he'll approach, like 20-25%, then I'm out. Like we have lots of other ways to attack this Buffalo team. And most of the production that we saw from Cole Beasley came when John Brown was sidelined. So, he would probably be like 4 or maybe even 5 on my list of priorities for the Bills if you wanted to, put one of the running backs in there. If you wanted to go with Singletary, like I think that's more interesting to me than Cole Beasley.
Yeah.
Yep. Positive, I think, just for if you're on the Bills, you're going to get lower ownership on some of these guys just because some of that's going to funnel over to Beasley.
Yep. Okay. Let's transition to some of the Sunday games. We'll hit on it from a betting perspective. Joe and I will give any kind of initial DFS thoughts we have, and just make sure we're covering all our bases here, especially for the brave who are playing in these 6-game slates. We got to take care of everybody here. So LaMarca, our first game tomorrow. What are we looking like in the betting markets? I should know who the first game is, but I do not off the top of
PP,
my
before we get there, we got to get the energy levels up a little bit. So there was something that came in the mail for me.
Oh,
so hang on one second.
I sent Joe a little package.
Oh boy.
It wasn't a text message either.
No, this is a Taysom Hill size package. Oh boy.
Uh-oh.
We got the hard hat. Oh, I can't wear my headphones with this.
Yeah, it's an issue. So Joe, I wanted to welcome him to Hand Builder Nation with a hard hat. He's been working hard this year, and I just want to make sure
Well, I'm not going to
protects
hear you
his
guys.
moneymaker safe up there.
This is great. So not only that, for all the people that are in the sports card world, look at that guy. Pete and I are going to do a box break at some point, and I'm probably going to have to wear this hat while I do it, man. So we're not going to space today, but we're going to get some energy back in here. This thing's surprisingly comfortable, by the way. So,
well, it's funny because I was actually planning on sending that to Joe regardless, and then he had asked me, he's like, "How have you not sent me a hard hat?" So he could just tell it was coming.
I had no idea it was coming, if I'm being completely honest. I fucking died when I opened that box. I was like, what? Wait. I thought, because you told Leone you got him a t-shirt, right? So I'm like, okay, cool. Pete's going to send me a t-shirt. This will be sweet. I open it. It's a hard hat. I'm like, you got it. I messaged Jordan right away. You'll never believe what Peter just sent me in the mail. I died, man. I might wear this on every show.
There's someone at Chris Hinshaw in the chat. Are the hard hats on the merch store? I mean, we got it. Line movement hard hats. There you go.
Just put a big L on the front of it. Be great.
Okay. All right. What's this first game, LaMarca, tomorrow?
First game is probably the best game of the whole weekend. We've got Baltimore heading in to Tennessee to take on the Titans. And this should be a really good one, right? Like the Ravens have been red hot. The Titans have been not as hot, but pretty hot. And we've got some interesting betting patterns. So like the early dollars were coming in on the Ravens. The Ravens have gotten 77% of the spread dollars in this game. There has been some buyback on Tennessee recently. I've got 3 separate steam moves over the last day or two on Tennessee at 3 or 3.5. And that's caused the consensus line is now 3 across the industry. So I do think that the majority of the sharp money that's coming in now is coming on Tennessee. And I agree with that assessment. Like we talked about this game earlier in the week. And after digging into it a little bit more, I landed squarely on the Tennessee side, which I wasn't expecting, but you just go through that Ravens, like game log, right? They have been so impressive on offense, but it could not have come against a worse group of defenses. It's, Cincinnati, New York Giants, Jaguars, Browns, Cowboys. So the Ravens have been really good over that stretch, but man, that is like the pure poo-poo platter of NFL defenses right there. So there is this narrative that Mike Vrabel has a good scheme against Lamar Jackson. They were very effective at limiting Jackson earlier this season. They obviously beat the Ravens in the playoffs last season. So I've come around to Tennessee. I think they're the correct side. And I'm fine if I'm on an island here because I know Joe likes him some Baltimore Ravens.
I do, but I'm quietly nervous now because not only LaMarca, earlier this week I went through each game and we picked a winner with me and Sigmund Bloom, and this was one of the games we disagreed on. He was on the Tennessee side of this game also, even before kind of some of this movement that we've seen. So slightly nervous. I'll say that I still think Baltimore is a team that no one wanted to face in the playoffs, which how they've played. I think the biggest difference in this game still, like we have all these polarizing players on offense on both sides, but the defense is where like the biggest differences to me. This Tennessee defense is horrendous. So I still think that, yeah, you can, I guess, put in that narrative that they know how to stop Lamar Jackson. I guess that makes some sense, but they also haven't stopped many people this year. So I still think that the side that I'd want to be on is Baltimore. If that makes me a fish, then I'll live and die by that. But I think this is one of the games, again, game number one that has a much higher total than the other two. So going to be really important for fantasy. I'm sure we'll dig a little bit deeper into that tomorrow also. But yeah, interesting game from a betting perspective. I still want Baltimore.
So just really quick, Pete, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good.
The Titans are horrendous on defense. That was something, again, we talked about earlier in the week, but they are not horrendous on defense in the type of way that should be beneficial to the Ravens. They are a pass funnel, right? They're not great against the run, but they're middle of the pack in that defense. Where they have been shredded this year is through the air. And we still don't have a confirmation that Lamar is capable of beating teams with his arm. If you can stop that Baltimore rushing attack and keep Jackson in the pocket, I don't feel confident that he is going to be able to pick the Titans apart, even with how bad they've been on defense, because we just have never seen it from him. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is the Lamar Jackson arm breakout party, but I need to see it before I'm willing to back it.
But you said it though. It's not like they're elite at defending the run either. So it's like it's not like the scale between like they're really good against the run, they're really terrible against the pass. If you can't pass, it's over. Like they're middle of the pack. I think that like that's making my argument right there is that they can decide how to beat Tennessee. So I get it, but I think that's maybe a stretch. I don't care about these defenses that are middle of the pack.
Fair point.
The one note I just wanted to mention, the 3-game slates aren't, super interesting just because the quarterback plays are more obvious, but the 6-game slate gets really interesting because Lamar versus Josh Allen is actually a really interesting conversation. And I think you could make a pretty good argument that even the Tennessee-Baltimore game environment has the potential for more points than even the Colts Buffalo game. So for those of you guys playing that, I do think taking a stand on one of those games makes sense as well. Let's talk about the pass catchers here. Mark Andrews, Marquise Brown, those guys are going to be super popular if you're wanting to roll out, Lamar Jackson double stacks. It does look like AJ Brown will continue to be kind of a little bit lower owned. And yeah, I'm looking at Osimo's projections right now. He has Derrick Henry kind of further down there as well, just because Alvin Kamara is, $700 cheaper and projects, even slightly better. So I guess just looking at ownership, my initial gut is to try to play it through the Ravens run game and the Titans pass game as a way to target it in a unique way. But do you guys have any other thoughts on how you would maybe approach that?
Go ahead, LaMarca.
I think paying up for Andrews might be a little bit more contrarian than you think it is. Like, I'm not saying he's not going to be the highest priced tight end or the highest owned tight end, but like, I don't think he gets to that like 30-40% range. It's just very easy to sacrifice him if you want to pay up at running back, pay up at a wide receiver position. Like, this is not the same thing as the Saturday slate. We have plenty of studs to choose from here. And we've seen like the difference in ceiling between Andrews and some of the other tight ends is not the same as the difference in ceiling between, like a Michael Thomas and one of these cheaper receivers. So it's easy to unclick Andrews' name. I think that he might be like my favorite play on the Ravens side, but yeah, Tennessee is where I'm going in this game. I love Corey Davis at his price tag. I don't know why he's so cheap. And I will probably have some big dog exposure.
Yeah. I kind of like the Corey Davis call too. I mean, one thing that's kind of stuck in my head, both looking at the math and also anecdotally, like AJ Brown and Derrick Henry have been pretty positively correlated this year. Like Tannehill, AJ, and the big dog go off when the Titans roll and put up big totals. Corey Davis has kind of been the garbage time king for them. He's been the guy getting all the soft, underneath targets in the fourth quarter when they're losing. So if you are telling yourself a story where the Ravens have a big lead, I do love the idea of the Corey Davis bring back here. Joe, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think we like to say kind of that Derrick Henry speeds up the game with those big plays, but we probably don't mention enough that speeds up the game for both sides also. So it means that like if there's going to be a team that's super efficient, like we always talk about Kansas City being super efficient, but like Tennessee, like we have these price tags on these guys like Derrick Henry, but also like if this game starts to get wacky, like it's not surprising that like the passing game has gotten there also in some of those games because there's just more possessions and overall with I guess the way that these teams are structured and the way they kind of break those big plays. So I'm in on that. Corey Davis, I'm with LaMarca, like 4,800. That's a terrible price for a guy that had 11 targets last week. I get it. He hasn't gotten the end zone in 2 straight weeks, dropped a bagel on us 2 weeks ago. But the ceiling is still there. I think that sometimes people look at volatility and just like these guys that have a lower floor as a negative. I actually kind of like these guys that are a little bit more Marvin Jones-esque, like boom or bust type of players. So I like Corey Davis at 4,800. I think he's one of the best plays on the entire Sunday slate. I think that like on the other side, the Baltimore side, and I'm a big Hollywood Brown guy. I'm always like a little bit cautious for these guys that have just been getting in the end zone, and that's why their price is going up. Like he had 8 targets last week, but the yardage just hasn't really been there. So I think that I am on the Andrew side of this one. So I'm with LaMarca on that one as well. Seems like we're pretty in line with this game. It's definitely different than Saturday because there's so much more to pay up for at running back, but it also drops off very similarly at tight end. Like after Mark Andrews, Cole Kmet, Jonnu Smith, Eric Ebron, like there's not a lot to like there. So I do think that Andrews is going to end up 30 to 40%, something like that. The higher stakes, probably even higher.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then do you it seems like J.K. Dobbins might go under the radar here a little bit. I know Gus Edwards is still going to be involved at the goal line, but man, J.K. Dobbins has been coming on strong. There's needles you have to thread though, right? Where he's not going to catch a ton of passes. He's probably going to lose some goal line work to both Gus and Lamar Jackson, but he has the talent to really break the slate on even 15 touches here with his breakaway run ability. Do you have any love for him, Matt?
I think I'm going to be out on Dobbins. Not that he's not a good player, not that it's not a good price. I do think that he might catch a little bit of steam on Sunday. Like people love the Ravens, right? I mean, people want to play the Ravens in this spot. This is going to be the highest owned team on the slate. So my Ravens exposure is going to be minimal. Maybe that's a bad idea. Maybe I lose all my money, but if this game goes how I think it's going to go, then Baltimore could, then fading Baltimore or being underweight on Baltimore could also pay huge dividends.
One thing I just want to circle back on because there were some Mike Evans reports. So they're saying he will play. Some of the kind of language from reporters didn't sound super bullish as far as how, effective. The one said he will try to play today. And then we had Rappaport who, we got to, take it with a grain of salt sometimes. Per him and James Palmer said he's been dealing with the knee injury all week, but he will play today versus Washington. So I'm definitely leaning toward him being active. I'm definitely leaning toward him being not a Keenan Allen kind of situation where he only plays a handful of snaps. But I do think there's some reason to be concerned about his overall workload there. Any other thoughts on Baltimore, Tennessee before we move on to this next game?
It's similar to like the Saturday slate, like trying to figure out some guys that might go like really under-owned and offer a little bit of leverage in this game is kind of difficult. Like I'm not really on the Willie Snead, Miles Boykin train. I get that Des Bryant's been scoring touchdowns, but like his ceiling is going to be extremely low. So I don't see a ton of leverage in this game outside of maybe AJ Brown, but I mean, that's more of a ceiling play because of his price, where I think a lot of people are going to opt to pay up for the running backs in this spot. So like, do we have any interest in going to these tight ends on Tennessee? They seem to be the ones that might go the lowest, Jonnu and Fursker all the way down to 2,700. So I don't know. Do you guys like either of those guys?
My only thought on Jonnu is I do not want to play him with the big dog because they are very negatively correlated and you're hoping for 2 kind of touchdowns from Jonnu, most likely in the red zone there, taking those away from Henry. So I probably wouldn't play Jonnu in Tennessee onslaughts, but as a way to get exposure to Tennessee while making some big fades, I think is how I would want to play that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like Ferkser has barely been on the field the last 2 weeks. 10 snaps in week 17, 8 snaps in week 16. Jeff Swaim has been the guy who has been on the field a lot more, but Swaim is like not a guy who's getting targets. He's more of a blocker. So it's interesting, like I probably would just play Jonnu if I was going to play a tight end here. But I do think that if you are trying to get real weird, that Ferkser is still the guy, even though he is like not even playing right now.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to this next game. This one should be fun. We have the Saints hosting the Bears. I am curious if the betting markets have any love for the Bears here taking the points.
They do not. 57% of the tickets, 75% of the dollars on New Orleans. I think that this is the hardest game of the week to handicap. I think that both of these teams might be overrated. Not as much as Dieter does. Dieter calls the Saints secret trash. That's what he's been calling them since basically like week 4.
Yeah, he's got some takes, man. Hates Kyler Murray, hates Deshaun Watson, thinks that the Saints are terrible. I don't get it, man.
I think that for my money, the Bears are the worst team that made the playoffs at 8-8. They did get hot offensively down the stretch with Mitch Trubisky back in there. But again, similarly to the Ravens, very, very friendly schedule for them. And last week they had to play a real game against the Green Bay Packers, and the Packers held them to 16 points. They won the game by 19 points. And if it was tough for Mitch against Green Bay, it's going to be even tougher for him against New Orleans. I did see that they will be without Davenport, who leads the team in sacks this year, but that shouldn't matter all that much against Trubisky. Like, as much as I like to say I'm a Mitch Trubisky truther, he's not that good. David Montgomery's not that good. So yeah, I think that the Saints are the correct side here. Breeze does have a pretty dubious track record as a home favorite during the playoffs, but they should be able to take care of business here. The interesting question for me is just what are we doing with Drew Brees in DFS? Because I think this salary is really low from him, but then again, we haven't seen any production from him really this season. Like, he has not displayed the 30 plus point ceiling that we've come to know from him in the past.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, real quick, before I do this, Joe, how many likes do we have on this video?
Nice.
A very nice amount of 69 likes currently. I don't know. We've been around like 225 or so pretty much the whole stream, so it seems a little light. I don't know.
All right, if we get it shouldn't even be a thing, but I will put on my hard hat if we can get to 150 likes here. Okay? We'll finish out this stream with 2 hard hat bros. And we got to get one of these to Matt LaMarca. I'll have you send me your address. I'll Amazon Prime you one. So that's the deal. Get us to 150 likes. If you're watching this, it's time to bust out the hard hats. We all have to go hand build some lineups here in about 8 minutes once this show is over. Yeah, it's hard to imagine Drew Brees separating, especially on the 6-game slate. You got to separate from Lamar and Josh Allen and these rushing quarterbacks. You got to separate from Brady and Tannehill, these other guys who can, throw to a bunch of their different pass catchers. So it's really hard for me to go there when you can just capture so much of the production via Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. But I definitely get it. We can get our dome boners going here for the Saints at home in a good spot. And everyone relatively healthy. They haven't been this kind of full strength most of the season. So I can talk myself into it. I don't think I'm going there, but I certainly appreciate it. I definitely agree that Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, I mean, those are the smash plays here. Chicago has a big 2 as well with Allen Robinson and David Montgomery. We still have to wait for some news and notes. Darnell Mooney has been pretty questionable all week with an ankle injury. Joe, are there any other kind of ancillary plays outside of those big 4 that you might be intrigued in here?
Yeah, people don't want to see the hard hat, apparently, Pete. So tough scene, I guess. They like my hard hat versus your hard hat, apparently. But yeah, I haven't played Drew Brees in like 4 years. So I guess I'm the last person you should ask about that. I guess get really scared that Taysom's going to come in, be a bigger part of the offense, that sort of thing. I guess the one part about this game that's kind of frustrating is we knew Kamara was going to be one of the options we were focused on, but I thought we'd get Michael Thomas at a reasonable price so that people would be a little bit nervous to play him, but he's so cheap that he's going to be one of the most high-owned players on this entire slate now. So that's frustrating. It would have been nice to get Michael Thomas at like 7K or like 7,200 at like half this ownership. It's not really even much of a conversation, right? At 6,300, he's one of the best plays in this game, or probably this best plays in this entire 3-game slate, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's definitely underpriced. LaMarca?
Yeah, he's a lock button for me.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's wrap up with this final game on the slate. Browns Steelers, gross divisional matchup. Everyone has kind of written off the Steelers just because they've looked so poor of late, but they are still, the 3 seed here at home. And the Browns have I just saw Denzel Ward, Kevin Johnson will not play on Sunday.
Oh
They're
my
going to
God.
remain on the COVID list. So, LaMarca, what was your gut reaction hearing that?
Well, Joe will tell you that I was already all in on Pittsburgh.
Yep.
And if you want to read about some of the 18 myriad ways why I love Pittsburgh, go check out my Sunday betting preview. But now without those guys, they're dead in the water. They have no. I would play this game anything less than 7 that you can still get. I love Pittsburgh, and I honestly would probably play it even higher than that if I had to.
Okay. Does that move in the confidence meter for you as well, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty heavy on Pittsburgh throughout this entire week. Also, most of the shells I've built so far, Pete, have been just stacks of this game, pretty Pittsburgh heavy. So I'm in on that. I mean, the rest that we get, I guess, from Big Ben and that arm, maybe that does him some good because he's looked pretty terrible pushing the ball down the field. Maybe it is someone underneath like Eric Ebron who's super cheap, like 3,700 for Eric Ebron, like. He's getting like 5-6 targets a game at this point. He's still a red zone threat. So I like Ebron a lot. Deontay Johnson is 6,200 is a guy that I think a lot of people will gravitate towards. Juju has been a little bit banged up. So like, I guess like I've messed around with some Chase Claypool, Rashard Higgins mini stacks also. Looks like Higgins is going to be the more popular guy on the Cleveland side, probably just because of his price at 4,100. So Pete, I'll kick it back to you. Is there a Pittsburgh wide receiver that you seem to be especially heavy on so far?
Yeah. So it was funny because we were arguing about this last night with, Leone was making the case for Juju Smith-Schuster, Gretchen and Pat and I were making the case for Claypool, and then Deontay Johnson is kind of the steady guy. And, our conversation was more centered around them over a 3, potentially 4 game span. If you're playing for a big playoff run, then I do think Deontay Johnson's just the guy. Over that period, he's probably going to outscore those other guys. But I do think Juju and Claypool in a 1 game sample, which we're talking about here for DFS, can definitely show that ceiling. I've seen a few narratives floating around that the Steelers were protecting Claypool. They didn't want him to hit the rookie wall. I mean, I kind of want to buy into those because I want to live in a world where Claypool is getting 10 plus targets and seeing what he can do with them. So I'm always going to lean Claypool here, just thinking he's the guy that has that 40-point ceiling because we've seen it. So LaMarca, are you there? Do you have a favorite Pittsburgh wide receiver?
I think I like Juju the best in this matchup. Cleveland has been, I mean, they're just not a good at pass defense in general, but their slot corner, MJ Stewart, he's got a 44.1 PFF grade this season. Like, it's a potential smash spot for Juju in the slot, but like, again, without Denzel Ward, like, you don't have to worry about any of these guys. So I might really like onslaught Pittsburgh in this spot. I may play all 3. I may play 2 in Ebron. I may play, James Conner even if I want to feel real gross. So like I think Pittsburgh feasts. I really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, and if we do think Pittsburgh feasts, I think, and maybe ownership's now going to change with this news, and people are going to be less excited. But if Nick Chubb is coming in at his kind of current ownership, I think he's a pretty easy fade. And if you're playing them in catch-up mode, I do think all the pass catchers are interesting. I think you mentioned Higgins, Landry, Hooper, even Kareem Hunt in negative game scripts. So I guess the question is, is this a game we want to target for garbage time, or is this such a Cleveland or Pittsburgh smash that you don't bring it back?
I think you can bring it back. I think that like by this point of the slate, you're probably going to be looking for something a little bit cheaper with what's available at running back, right? So like I've been getting a lot of Higgins on the bringbacks, but I think that's going to be relatively popular. Like I guess do we want to like take a shot on like a Donovan People-Jones at 3,200, something like that, just to hope to break a big play on the other side? Like I don't know, Jarvis Landry 5,800 maybe. I think it's fine to bring back on the other side at this point of the slate. Like you're probably going to be slightly more unique if you just have that extra slot available as well. So that always kind of leads me towards like if you're really Pittsburgh heavy, find at least one guy on the other side.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. Any other takes on this game before we wrap up the show? Joe, did we hit 150 likes?
No, man, no hard hat for you, man. Tough scene.
Sorry, guys, you don't get the hard hat. I know there's a lot of hard hat fetishes out there. I'm not going to let you indulge those today. You're just going to have to get your rocks off via Joe. A phrase I didn't think I would end up saying here on this beautiful Saturday morning, but I did. Hot takes, guys. Do we have a favorite play, a favorite bet that we can give the people? The Spark Note edition. LaMarca, what do you have for him?
Just do yourself a favor and bet the Steelers. Get it now because this line's going up. It'll be at 7 before kickoff tomorrow. That's my prediction. So anything less than that is a good bet. Hopefully you grabbed it earlier in the week when it was, floating between 3.5 and 4.5. But if you missed it, I still think you have time to grab it.
Yeah, a couple that Jordan mentioned in the chat. Stephon Diggs to score was one that he really likes. Another one that I think is interesting is going under on the J.K. Dobbins props. He's a guy that's kind of like living off of efficiency right now. He's just not getting enough touches. Like Gus is basically getting 10 touches per game. I don't know. I think that J.K. Dobbins, I get it. He's breaking big plays. He's like a Chubb light type of player. But I think the unders in those situations almost always make sense.
All right, guys. I need to go and tinker with my 6-game cash shell. I need to go tinker. Joe and I are going to build, I believe, a lineup on FanDuel for the 6-game slate. We will be back. We have 2 shows tomorrow. So we're going to do our typical Sunday pre-kickoff show at the same time, 11 a.m. Dieter will be there with us. We're going to do the same thing we did today, but focusing obviously exclusively on the 3-game slate. And then the tilt space, we will be back. We haven't hammered down the exact time, but I think we're thinking halftime of the 2nd game tomorrow between Chicago and them, right?
Dude, Leone is just like so like in his own like Bills bubble right now. We haven't been able to lock him down for anything. But yeah, I think the plan right now is to go halftime in game number 2. If that changes, we'll let you guys know.
Yeah, so the idea is there we can get some live sweats going. We can talk some late swap for the late game. And so please join us for those shows tomorrow. Hit the subscribe button. And I'm a little disappointed in you guys that we didn't get to 150 likes. I didn't get the hard hat. But tomorrow's a new day. And we will rise and we will grind and we will head to the construction site where we will build winners and winners. For Matt LaMarca, for Joel Holka, I'm Peter Overzet. This has been the Line Movement pre-kickoff show. Good luck today, guys.